ChessDiagnostic.
Hello everybody and welcome to ChessDiagnostic. I just want to start off by saying thanks for getting this channel to 1,000 subs. That's pretty cool to see. Now, I've been working on some videos, but I really haven't been posting just because I want to focus more on making very quality videos. And I've also been working on my own game off the computer. Now, when I start working on my own personal chess game, I do pull out a real board and I do a lot of guess the move type training. So this is a game that I did that with, and this was an older game of Magnus Carlsen's, played in 2005 between Carlsen and Vachier-Lagrave. They were around 2,500 at this point, so they were still grandmasters, and this is just a very interesting game, very fun game. So I'll start off again here with e4, c5, knight to f3, d6, d4. So we're getting the Sicilian, knight to f6, and they kind of have a weird move order, but knight to c3, c takes d, knight takes d, and now with a6 we get the Najdorf variation, and the Opasensky variation with the quiet and positional bishop to e2. Now Carlsen likes to play, at this point in his career, quite positional and subtle. He's not really going for very sharp and aggressive lines, but what he does is he just focuses on very classical openings that lead to standard middle game positions where he can just simply outplay his opponent. He doesn't really try too hard, and that's really the genius of Magnus Carlsen, is he's outplaying his opponents in the middle game, and they don't even realize it. If they head into an endgame, he's already won. And Capablanca had that ability as well. Alright, so we see e6, Vachier-Lagrave is just focusing on normal development, but in a few moves we'll see that he has some trouble with his queenside development. So f4. Now I do play this line in my own games as white, and I normally like to go for standard development of bishop to e3, castle kingside, and then just put pressure on the center. But we see a slightly different idea here by Carlsen. After bishop to e7, of course, preparing to castle, white castles, black castles, and now instead of the normal bishop to e3, Carlsen plays a little more positional with a4. Now he's focusing on restricting black's queenside, which can be a problem because it's sometimes hard for black to get this knight out, this bishop is bad, and the rook as well. So Vachier-Lagrave comes up with his own idea. I think it was originally used by Kasparov, of playing b6 and then bringing the rook out here and then to the c file. Carlsen's just increasing the pressure slowly. Now notice that this bishop is, even though it's not developed here to its most active square, it's still quite good, keeping this pawn protected as well as the f pawn, and he can develop it at any time. Now the strength of the bishop is that even if you don't move them from their initial square, they can still be developed. Alright, so he develops it anyway, starting to put pressure on this dark square diagonal and the b6 pawn. And Vachier-Lagrave just follows his plan of developing that rook first. It's a little slow. Magnus Carlsen takes advantage of that by starting to put pressure in the center. Now this is an idea of Kasparov just developing his rook and allowing him to try to get these minor pieces out quickly as possible. But in this game, it looks like Carlsen, his center play and kingside attack is quite strong, and it's hard for Vachier-Lagrave to develop quickly. Alright, of course, preventing g5. With queen to d2, we can see that Carlsen has completed his development by connecting his rooks. He's ready to do a lot of things, playing in the center as well as increasing his kingside attack pressure. A move back, of course, we know that reduces your activity, but he's doing that to try to keep a hold on the g5 square. And now at this point, Carlsen's totally developed, and Vachier-Lagrave's a little behind. He does have ideas just like bringing knight to c6, but he plays a little inaccurately after trading. Now, even if the queen came, he could just trade and he'd have a slightly better ending, Carlsen would. He wants to keep that bishop, of course. And now here, instead of playing knight to c6, Vachier-Lagrave just gives away a pawn for somewhat speedy development, but it doesn't lead to any advantage for him, and it actually just gave away a pawn for nothing. So even at this point, you can consider Carlsen won because of this weak pawn, this very strong f5 square. Of course, you can't chase it with this g6 pawn because that would just weaken the h6 pawn and his king side. And he consolidates, or Carlsen consolidates, that g4 pawn, and now he's ready to just increase the activity of his pieces. Now this trade isn't really the best, but it's hard to figure out what Vachier-Lagrave could do. He could move rook to c6 to protect that pawn, but these weak pawns are going to fall, and the strength of Carlsen's pieces has already led to a won game. Of course, he takes with the e-pawn, allowing this threat, and there's really nothing that Vachier-Lagrave can do about it. The computer wants to keep material by playing rook to c5, but of course after queen takes d6, it's pretty hopeless for Vachier-Lagrave. He's going to lose a ton of pawns. He's already lost a ton of pawns anyway, but these weak pawns and White's complete domination of the d-file is enough for an easy win. So we don't get that line. Vachier-Lagrave just decides to try to get some counterplay by attacking on the king side himself, but it doesn't really lead to any counterplay that leads to anything. We still see that d6 pawn being taken, a trade-off, and now he just gives the exchange, and it's pretty much over at this point. The computer's rating it as plus 2.4, but we'll see how Carlsen finishes him off. He does have to play accurately here because those two knights present a lot of opportunity for a counterattack. Now the knight takes that pawn with check, and he takes some material back. But at this point, White's strong pieces, even though Black's getting a counterattack, White's strong pieces are just overwhelming against the weak Black king. Rook takes, and now at this point we have a mating possibility. If you want to pause the video, you can try to solve it. It starts with a check. Alright, so we see here that the king is sitting open to these two rooks, and actually Carlsen goes for knight to f6, opening that file, and then with these moves, he's one move away from mate. So the only issue is that he has to figure out how to prevent an endless barrage of checks, and he does that by simply focusing on not allowing this knight to get back in the game with check. So the rook checks, and he moves back to prevent, for example, if he moved here, or cutting off the rook diagonal, and he just basically prevents a bunch of knight checks. Staying on the light square, and we get this kind of beautiful coup de grace where he moves. I just like that ending where he's finally moved. At this point, Vachier-Lagrave resigns because the only checks he has here or here allow Carlsen to just threaten the rook and then threaten mate at the same time. Now notice this knight is completely over here inactive. It took a pawn, but it should really be over here protecting this other knight. But because of his inactive pieces and his inability to defend himself, Carlsen got a relatively easy win. Now if we go down and look at the analysis graph, you can see here that there wasn't any mistakes really by Carlsen's side, and he just slowly but surely increased his advantage until he was completely winning. A very beautiful and interesting game by Carlsen. I hope you enjoyed this. I'll be posting more in the future, releasing some videos. I just want them to be perfect, so I appreciate your patience. Anyway, I'll see you in the future, and thanks for watching. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe for future videos. See you in the future.